Hey everyone, I'm Caleb, and we're going to be doing the front shoes on this little paint horse here. This was my first time doing this paint horse. She was overdue. I think she was a month overdue, maybe more, so she was like 3 months. Since her last farrier appointment, she was actually a pretty nice little horse to work on. At this point, we were still dealing with snow and mud and rain. This video is from March. And you'll see here that she has a frog support pad on. You can see that's just meant to give the frog a little more contact with the ground. And I think it was a 1 degree or 2 degree wedge pad. And we'll kind of show you what we did different, what we put in there instead. You can see a little bit of blue under the pad. That's probably a little dental impression or maybe some pour-in material. All the black that you're seeing in there, all that like kind of black material, that's probably some thrush. Thrush is an anaerobic bacteria. Generally, how we treat thrush is just to get rid of as much dead necrotic tissue as we can, and then just open it up to the air. Air is the enemy of thrush. So you can see we're just going to pare out all that dead sole. You can see there's a little bit of false sole in the bottom of the foot there. I'm using a Salcedo knife here. I started using Salcedos November, December of last year, and I really like them. I haven't used anything else since. They stay sharp a lot longer than some, and when you get them sharp, they're actually super sharp. Right there, that's the commissure that I'm cleaning out there. Again, all that black, thrushy, dead material, we want to get as much of that cleared out and get this foot opened up to the air. So I usually carry a right and left-handed Salcedo knife, a loop knife that I use for abscesses, and then a hoof pick. The right-handed knife is my main knife, but I use the left-handed knife to actually work the right side of the hoof that's hard to get to with your right-handed knife. We're going to nip the hoof here. We're going to keep the nippers as flat as we can, and we're going to try to bring the heels back as much as we can to the widest point of the frog so that they actually support the hoof and the limb. It doesn't do any good to have tall heels if they're rolling underneath the hoof and not functioning properly. You can see that frog looks kind of rough. Having that particular pad and shoe on for so long probably didn't help its health. So what I'm doing here, where I was nipping, rasping the bottom of the hoof, that's considered taking depth as compared to length. Length is what we take from the top. So sometimes people go, oh, my horse is super long, and then I'll only trim off like 1/8 of an inch or a little more, and they'll go, well, it seems super long still. That's because I haven't addressed the length. I've only addressed the depth of the foot. So we're going to flatten that hoof out. And you can kind of start to see here, if you look at that line right there, just to the inside of the hoof wall, that's called the white line. And that's my marker. So as I work my rasp around the outside of the foot here, I'm looking at that white line and trying to make the hoof wall the same width all the way around the foot. Because right there, so like there's a little distortion. You can still see like that little hook right there in the heel, and we're going to address that right there. We want a nice flow. We want to get that foot just to have a nice flow. We don't want any hard, sharp angles. Nature doesn't have hard, sharp angles as a rule. So I measure the foot, I measure the heels, and then I measure from the toe to the lateral heel. So when I go to the anvil, I have a shape in my mind, like the shape of the foot. I go to the anvil and I put that shape in a shoe. And then I measure it to see if it has the same measurements as the hoof. So here I'm addressing length. And you can see there's a ton of length to address. She's kind of leaning on me a little bit heavy here. Rasp control is really important. If you want to have a nice finish to your foot, you have to get to where you can control your rasp. And you'll notice that when I rasp, my rasp stays on the hoof. It's because the rasp only cuts in one direction. So I leave it on the foot and I kind of let it move around the foot. And this is how I get a really nice flow. And then I'm looking at that mark that I just made while I still had the horse swung underneath. And I'm rasping to that mark so that I make sure that the hoof wall is the same width all the way around. There's two sides to the rasp. There's the rough side and then there's the finish side. And the finish side is what I'm using now, and it just gets rid of all the kind of tiny rasp marks that just don't look super great. This is a brand new rasp. You can just tell by the way it's moving on the hoof and how big the chunks are that are coming off of it. I put a little bit of a roll on it. That's just to keep it when I set it down from breaking. Okay, so this is a shoe that I haven't shaped at all, and you can see it's kind of close. It's a size 1, I believe. Yeah, size 1 Kirkhart. And now I'm going to burn the shoe. So this seats the shoe to the hoof. And we make sure that our shoe is flat coming off the anvil. So if there's any little discrepancies in my rasping on the bottom where I didn't quite get it flat, then the shoe burns the whole hoof. It burns it flat. That looks pretty good. You can still see there's like a couple little spots that are a little low, but that's okay. They're like super minute. Right here, I'm taking the little burr off. So there's like this, when you set that hot shoe on there, there's like this little burr that starts where the hoof is kind of melted, and you just want to get rid of that. Make sure, because it can affect when you're setting the shoe to nail it up, how you set it. I'm unseating sole pressure here. Again, sole pressure is super important. It's one of the number one things you can do as a farrier to create a lameness. When I get done trimming the foot, I usually look at it and then I decide what kind of shoe I want. Do I need to rocker the shoe? Do I need clips? In this horse's case, I decided that I wanted to put a 3D half mesh 3-degree wedge pad. It's one of my favorite pads to use. I've used them a lot, and I really like how they help a horse that needs maybe a little more angle. It also gives some support to the frog. And because they have holes, as you can see right there, all through the pad, when you nail them to the bottom of the foot, the impression material moves up into those holes and presses into them, and it holds that impression material in place for the cycle of the shoes being on. So generally like 6 weeks, and you'll come back and all that impression material is still in the bottom of the foot. The other thing that I do, that you saw me do here, is I put copper sulfate granulars under the impression material. And that's honestly one of the best ways I've found to deal with thrush. It just keeps it way down. It kills all that bad bacteria that gets stuck under a pad or under some dental impression material. There's different hardnesses too for the dental impression material. You can have soft, super soft, medium soft, so you can really tailor it to what the horse needs. Now we're going to cut off the tops of the nails. I used to do a method called wringing them off, which is where you take the claw on your hammer and kind of twist it and break them off. Now I tend to just bend them over. When they're pointed in that direction, I've never had them get me, and it's a little bit faster, and I think I get a better, more consistent clinch doing it this way. But everybody has kind of a different method. So right here, just get that rasped up a little bit. And then what I'm doing here is there's a little burr, a little piece of hoof when the nail pops out, and I get rid of that. So when I clinch them, they just bend right over and are nice and flat up against the hoof wall. The idea is that your clinches are straight up and down, and they're all the same length. They're not too short and not too long. Now I'm going to hit them with a sanding block. I don't do this on every horse. Some horses I don't do it on. But I do like to do it. It definitely adds to the finish and makes the foot look super nice. And that should about do it for that foot. Okay, and so now we're going to work on the other foot. It's pretty much the same process. We're just going to get this shoe pulled off. They had the same kind of shoe and pad system on this foot as they did on the other side. Again, look at all that. That I think was part of the. I think it was I think it was a pour-in pad that they put underneath. So you can kind of see the false sole there under the foot. You can see how long those heels are, how far forward they are in reference to the back of the frog. You just see that. Oh, it's just so satisfying when that whole hoof just peels out of there. Again, you can see all the black. This hoof actually smelled pretty bad. Not gonna lie, it was pretty ripe. There we go. So right there, that's the center sulcus that I'm working on. You can just see, it's kind of gooey in there. That's not how you want your horse's feet to look. I've had a lot of people go, "Oh, don't touch the heel. Don't trim the heel. She's already too far. She's too far down on her heels." Like, this is a good example of that. Like, she looks super long. Her heels, it looks like she's pushed back on her heels. A lot of that's due to the fact that the heel of her hoof is almost a quarter or a third of the way forward on the hoof itself. So it's moved forward into like the middle of the hoof. And then you can see there, look at that toe, look at all the distortion in the toe. You can see the white line right there. And then you can see how wide that hoof wall is. And then if you look at the heels, you can see kind of how narrow it is. That's kind of what it's supposed to be. If you look at that heel on that would be the left side of your screen, you can see that medial heel, the width of the hoof wall there as compared to the hoof wall in the toe. So that, like, this is a big part of when you're shoeing a horse, is you need to get rid of the distortion. If you don't get rid of the distortion, there's really no point to putting a shoe on them. And distortion doesn't necessarily just take place up in the toe. I think a lot of us get confused about that. Distortion can be in the heels, it can be in the quarters, or it can be in the toe. I think we generally see it more in the toe, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen other places. This particular day when we were shoeing this horse, it was blowing and snowing, and it was just an absolutely miserable day. At one point I was working and there was hail being blown into the shed as I was working on the foot. Stand up. You can see her kind of leaning on me pretty hard. Again, here I'm addressing distortion. So I'm not thinning the hoof wall out to the point that it's not going to support the horse. I'm only getting rid of the distortion. So you can see I'm kind of checking to where I made that mark from the bottom. So I know that mark is pretty much even all the way around. So as long as I only rasp to that mark, I won't rasp too much hoof wall off the outside. Here you can kind of see my shoeing trailer in the background. My forge, I'm working on putting a swing out on the forge so it's not inside the trailer, especially with summer coming up. That's just really hot in there. Okay, we're gonna set the shoe, check fit. Okay. Little brushy. We're gonna get rid of that burr. I talked about it earlier in the video. There's a little burr that comes up when you put a hot shoe on the foot. It kind of melts that little part of the hoof right on the corner, and you just want to get rid of that burr. Get rid of sole pressure. I just want to make sure I get those commissures and that frog as clean as I can, so that we don't leave any thrush or other bacteria in there. We're actually trying out a new product. It should be out in a couple of newer videos that does the same thing as this copper sulfate, but should do it better. And we'll have some videos coming out on that pretty soon. I'm actually super excited about it. You can hear the water dripping in the background. I also usually mix the copper sulfate into the dental impression material as well. Okay, that looks pretty good. So right now I'm checking fit, making sure that the whole hoof is covered. We don't want to do what we call cheating the hoof wall, which is where we didn't shape the shoe quite to the shape of the foot, and instead maybe we weren't wide enough on one side or the other, and so when we put it on, we end up rasping off hoof wall. Rasping off some hoof wall is acceptable, but we don't want to be dubbing the toe or taking off a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch of hoof to fit the shoe. So I pitch my nails differently. So the nails in the back, in the third nail hole, the first ones I drove, they are pitched less. The ones in the toes are pitched more. And we pitch them depending on also the pitch of the hoof wall itself. So a horse that's more low angled, has a wider foot, we're pitching those nails more than we would on, say, like a very upright or clubby foot. So you can see what I was talking about here. You can see how the dental impression is pushed up into the pad, and that's just one of my favorite designs of this particular pad, is that I'm able to put dental impression underneath the pad and it stays in place the entire cycle. So usually my horses go between 5 and 6 weeks, and it stays there the whole time, and then with that copper sulfate underneath, it just kills all the bacteria that would normally be a problem when padding a horse. Right here I'm kind of boxing the pad a little bit. You can do this on your grinder as well. I usually just do it here. Just finishing the foot. In one of my other videos, I had some people comment on the fact that they hear heavy breathing throughout some of my videos, and that would be me, actually. So this is probably the hardest part. Rasping is a lot of cardio. You have to stay in pretty good shape to shoe horses, really. I've seen some guys that were out of shape, but it's just so much harder on them. And for everybody's information, that's not my cell phone. That's why I leave my cell phone on vibrate. His wife really wanted to talk to him. We'll just finish up the foot with a little sanding block here, and that should be about it. So I've got a little announcement for everybody. We've got some videos coming out. We've got something super exciting that we've been talking about doing for a long time, so stay tuned. I believe Thursday or Friday will be the announcement. I'm pretty excited about it. It's been in the works for a long time, so everybody stay tuned. We're going to have some pretty exciting news coming up at the end of the week. And with that, hope you all enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll catch you next time.